The Veil storm came once every decade, a supernatural tempest that swallowed wolves whole and left nothing behind but silence. When its black clouds rolled across the horizon, even the strongest alphas retreated underground. No one traveled. No one survived the open wild. So when Melis heard the scratching at her door, she should have ignored it. She was a rejected Omega living in a forgotten cabin at the edge of no man's land, cast out from her pack 3 years ago for reasons she could never speak aloud. Her shame was carved into her very bones, hidden beneath her skin where no one could see. If anyone discovered what she truly was, death would be a mercy compared to what they'd do to her. The scratching came again, then a whimper. Against every instinct screaming at her to stay hidden, Milas opened the door. By midnight, 12 wolves had found their way to her shelter. Strays, all of them, rejected, wounded, abandoned. The unwanted of the wolf world, drawn to her cabin like moths to a flame they didn't understand. Melis took them all in. She fed them from her meager stores. She dressed their wounds with trembling hands. She gave them her blankets, her fire, her protection, though she had no power to offer. She didn't notice the 13th wolf until dawn broke. He stood in the corner where shadows still clung, watching her with eyes like molten honey. Unlike the others, he wasn't broken. He wasn't desperate. He carried himself like a creature who had never begged for anything in his life. When the storm cleared and he stepped into the light, Melis stopped breathing. The Alpha King of Valdrin had spent the night in her cabin, and now he was looking at her like she was the answer to a question she didn't understand. "You," he said quietly, "will be my Luna." Neither of them knew how those words would nearly destroy them both. The sky had been wrong for 3 days. Melis noticed it first in the birds, how they fled south in massive, shrieking clouds. Then the deer vanished from the forest. The rabbits burrowed deep. Even the insects went silent, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. The veil storm was coming. She stood at the window of her small cabin, watching the horizon darken with clouds that moved against the wind. They weren't natural, those clouds. They pulsed with something alive, something hungry. Old wolves spoke of the veil storm in whispers, said it was the breath of a dead god, said it devoured any wolf caught in its path and left not even bones behind. Melis had survived one veil storm before, 10 years ago, huddled in the cellar of her family's home while her mother held her close and sang softly to drown out the screaming wind. Her mother was dead now. Her family was gone. Her pack had cast her out like rotten meat. Now Milas would face the storm alone. She'd spent the morning reinforcing her cabin, nailing boards over windows, dragging furniture against doors. Her stores were meager, just enough dried meat and grain to last a week if she rationed carefully. The well behind the cabin had fresh water. The cellar was deep. She would survive. She always survived. That was her curse. The first wolf arrived just as the sky turned the color of a bruise. Melis heard him before she saw him, a rasping, dragging sound on the forest path. She grabbed the rusted knife she kept by the door and peered through the gap in the boards. A male wolf, old and graying, limped toward her cabin. His left hind leg was mangled, dragging uselessly behind him. Blood matted his fur. His eyes, when they found hers through the gap, were filled with nothing but exhausted resignation. He was a stray. She could smell it on him, the absence of pack scent, the loneliness that clung to wolves who belonged to no one, like her. "Please," he rasped, his voice cracking. "The storm. I cannot outrun it." Melis's hand tightened on the knife. Taking in a stray was dangerous. If anyone discovered she was harboring wolves, if her former pack ever tracked her down, the punishment would be severe. Rejected Omegas were meant to die alone. That was the law. That was the way. The old wolf's legs buckled. He collapsed on her doorstep, too weak to even beg anymore. Malus opened the door. She dragged him inside, her muscles screaming with the effort. He was heavier than he looked, all bone and desperate will. She laid him by the fire and wrapped his wounded leg with strips torn from her only spare blanket. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Malus said quietly. "The storm hasn't passed." His name was Corvin, she learned. 60 winters old, cast out from his pack when he became too slow to hunt. His alpha had called him a burden. His own sons had refused to speak in his defense. He'd been wandering for 2 moons, eating scraps, sleeping in ditches, waiting to die. "But I smelled smoke," he said, his eyes drifting toward sleep. "Your chimney. I thought perhaps someone might spare an old wolf one final kindness." Milas said nothing. She tucked another blanket around him and tried not to think about how much he reminded her of her grandfather. The second wolf came an hour later. A female, young, with haunted eyes and hands that curved protectively over her swollen belly, pregnant and abandoned. Malus didn't ask questions. She simply opened the door. Then came a mother with 2 pups clinging to her back, their faces gaunt with hunger. Then a scarred male who flinched at every sound. Then a girl barely 16, mute from trauma, who communicated only through wide, terrified eyes. By midnight, 12 wolves filled her cabin. Malus moved among them like a ghost, distributing her food, sharing her water, sacrificing her blankets one by one until she had nothing left for herself. The cabin that had felt so empty for 3 years now overflowed with warmth, with breath, with the quiet sounds of creatures who had forgotten what safety felt like. Outside, the Veilstorm hit. The sound was indescribable. A roaring so deep it vibrated in Malus's chest, a shrieking so high it pierced her skull. The walls shook. The fire guttered. The pups began to cry, and their mother pulled them close, her eyes squeezed shut. "It's all right," Milas found herself saying, though she didn't know if it was true. "We're safe here. The cabin will hold." She didn't know if that was true either. Hours passed. The storm raged. Malus lost track of time, lost track of everything except the wolves huddled around her, depending on her, trusting her for reasons she couldn't fathom. She was checking on Corvin's bandages when she felt it. A presence. Malus froze, her hand still on the old wolf's leg. The sensation crawled up her spine like cold fingers, a pressure in the air that made her wolf stir uneasily beneath her skin. Someone was watching her. She turned slowly, scanning the cabin. The pregnant female dozed by the fire. The pups had finally fallen asleep. The scarred male sat in the corner, staring at nothing. And beyond him, in the darkest corner where the firelight didn't reach, stood a figure she hadn't noticed before. Malus's breath caught. He was tall, taller than any wolf she'd ever seen. His shoulders were broad, his posture perfectly still, like a predator waiting to strike. She couldn't see his face in the shadows, only the faint gleam of his eyes watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. She hadn't heard him enter. She hadn't smelled him arrive. He'd simply appeared, as if the shadows themselves had given him form. "Who are you?" Milas whispered. He didn't answer. The storm screamed outside, and in the darkness, those wolf gold eyes never blinked. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Malus's pulse spiked as she stared at the stranger in the shadows. Her wolf was reacting strangely, not with fear exactly, but with something else. Something that felt like recognition, though she'd never seen this male before in her life. "I asked who you are," she repeated, her voice steadier than she felt. The stranger shifted, and for the first time, she caught a glimpse of his features as firelight flickered across them. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw carved from stone, dark hair that fell across his forehead in disheveled waves. He was beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful, elegant and dangerous and meant for destruction. "A traveler," he said finally. His voice was low, quiet, but it carried a weight that made the other wolves stir uneasily. The storm caught me on the road. I saw your light. A traveler. Malus didn't believe that for a second. Everything about this male screamed predator, from the controlled stillness of his body to the way his eyes tracked her every movement. Travelers didn't carry themselves like kings. But the storm still raged outside, and she couldn't turn anyone away tonight. Not even him. "There's space by the fire," she said carefully. "Food if you need it. Water in the basin." He inclined his head, a gesture so formal it seemed almost mocking. Then he moved, emerging from the shadows with a grace that made her mouth go dry. He was injured, she realized. His left arm hung slightly stiff, and when the firelight caught his torso through his torn shirt, she glimpsed dark stains that could only be blood. "You're hurt," Malus said. "It's nothing." "It doesn't look like nothing." His eyes met hers, and something flickered in their amber depths. Surprise, perhaps, or curiosity. "You would tend to a stranger's wounds? You don't know what I am? What I've done?" "I don't care what you've done," Malus said simply. "Tonight, you're just another wolf trying to survive the storm. Sit down and let me look at your arm." For a heartbeat, she thought he might refuse. His jaw tightened, and she saw a flash of something that looked almost like pain cross his features. Not physical pain, something deeper. Then, slowly, he sat. Malus gathered her remaining supplies, clean cloth, water, and the herbs she'd been saving for emergencies. She knelt beside him, acutely aware of how he towered over her even seated. Up close she could smell him beneath the blood and rain. Pine and smoke and something darker, something that made her wolf whimper with unfamiliar longing. "This will sting," she warned, pressing the wet cloth to the gash on his arm. He didn't flinch, didn't make a sound. He simply watched her work with those unreadable eyes, as if she were a puzzle he was trying to solve. "You took in 12 strays," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. "I counted 11, Malus replied, focused on cleaning the wound. "Before you." 12, he corrected. "The boy hiding in the cellar. He came through the back." Milas's hand stilled. She hadn't known about a boy in the cellar. She'd been so busy with the others, she hadn't even checked. "You noticed," she said slowly, "but you didn't say anything." He was afraid. Drawing attention to him would have made it worse. The stranger paused. "You would have found him eventually. You seem the type to check every corner." Malus resumed bandaging, but her mind was racing. This male noticed everything, processed everything. He'd been in her cabin for perhaps an hour, and he'd already cataloged details she'd missed. Who was he? "Why would a rejected Omega risk her safety for strays?" he asked suddenly. The question hit her like a physical blow. Malus's hands faltered, and for a moment she couldn't breathe. "How did you know I was rejected?" No pack scent, no mating mark, a cabin in the middle of nowhere, far from any territory. His voice was soft, almost gentle. "You carry loneliness like a second skin. I recognize it." She should have been angry. She should have been defensive. Instead, she felt something crack open in her chest, a vulnerability she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. "They're like me," she heard herself say. "The strays. They have nowhere else to go. No one else who wants them. I know what that feels like." The stranger was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Lower, rougher. "And if taking them in brings danger to your door? If someone comes looking for one of them? Then I'll deal with it." "You could die." Milas finally looked up, meeting his gaze directly. "I've been dying slowly for 3 years, ever since they cast me out. At least this way, I die for something that matters." The words hung between them, heavy and raw. The stranger's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. The coldness receded, replaced by something that looked almost like pain, almost like recognition. "You are not what I expected," he murmured, so quietly she almost didn't hear it. "What did you expect?" He didn't answer. Instead, he looked away, toward the fire, toward the wolves sleeping peacefully because of her kindness. The pregnant female had curled around her belly, one hand resting protectively over her unborn child. The pups had burrowed into their mother's fur, tiny faces slack with exhausted peace. Even Corvin, the old wolf who had been so close to death, breathed steadily now, color returning to his cheeks. Malus had done that. She had given them safety when no one else would. "The storm will pass by dawn," the stranger said finally. Malus nodded, tying off his bandage. "Then you'll be free to go. You all will." Another silence. Then, so softly she almost missed it, "And if I don't want to go?" Her hand stilled on his arm. Her blood rushed in her ears. "What?" But he'd already turned away, closing his eyes as if preparing to sleep. Malus retreated to her corner of the cabin, too unsettled to rest. She sat against the wall, watching the stranger's still form, watching the firelight play across features that seemed carved by a cruel and generous god. "Who are you?" she wondered for the 100th time. Outside, the storm raged on, and in the deepest part of the night, when she finally drifted into uneasy sleep, she dreamed of golden eyes and a voice that whispered promises she didn't understand. She woke to silence. The storm had passed. Dawn light crept through the gaps in the boarded windows, pale gold after the darkness of the storm. Malus blinked awake, her body stiff from sleeping against the wall, and for a moment she forgot where she was. Then she heard the breathing, the soft sounds of 12 wolves sleeping around her, and everything rushed back. The storm, the strays, the stranger. She sat up quickly, scanning the cabin. The pregnant female, Diel, was still asleep by the fire. The pups were stirring, yawning tiny mouths. Corvin's eyes were open, watching the ceiling with the quiet peace of a man who had expected to die and hadn't. But the corner where the stranger had slept was empty. Malus's chest tightened with sudden panic. She scrambled to her feet, ignoring the protests of her aching muscles, and moved through the cabin. The cellar. She needed to check the cellar, find the boy the stranger had mentioned, and make sure everyone was accounted for. She was halfway to the cellar door when she felt it again. That presence. That weight in the air. She turned. The stranger stood in the doorway of her cabin, backlit by dawn. The light caught his features fully for the first time, and Malus felt her breath leave her body in a rush. He was beautiful, devastatingly, impossibly beautiful. But that wasn't what made her freeze. It was the way he stood, the way he held himself, the quiet command that radiated from every line of his body, and the crest on his chest. She hadn't seen it in the darkness, hidden beneath his torn shirt. But now, in the morning light, the silver emblem gleamed unmistakably against the dark fabric. A wolf's head wreathed in shadow, 3 claw marks slashing across its face. The royal crest of Valdrin, the symbol of the Alpha King. "No," Malus whispered. The word escaped before she could stop it. "No, that's not possible." The stranger, the king, watched her with those amber eyes. His expression was unreadable, but something flickered beneath the surface. Curiosity, interest, something darker that she couldn't name. "You recognize it," he said. Not a question. Malus took a step back. Her wolf was screaming at her, a chaos of conflicting instincts. Run, hide, submit, fight. You're the Soren," he said quietly. "Alpha King of Valdrin, yes." The cabin seemed to shrink around her. Malus was suddenly aware of everything, the raggedness of her clothes, the dirt beneath her nails, the strays sleeping around her like evidence of crimes she hadn't known she was committing. She had ordered the Alpha King to sit. She had bandaged his wounds like he was a common stray. She had spoken to him about dying, about loneliness, about things she'd never told another living soul. Horror flooded her veins. "Your Majesty," she gasped, dropping into a clumsy bow. "I didn't know. I never would have presumed to speak so freely if I had known who you were. Please, forgive my disrespect. I beg your mercy. Stop." The command wasn't loud, but it carried an authority that froze her mid-sentence. Milas stayed bent, trembling, waiting for judgment. The Alpha King had the power to execute her where she stood, to destroy everyone in this cabin with a single order. She had insulted him, touched him, and treated him like a commoner. She was going to die. Footsteps approached. Then a hand appeared in her vision, extended toward her. "Rise," Soren said. "Look at me." Malis straightened slowly, adrenaline flooding her veins. She forced herself to meet his gaze, expecting fury, expecting cold disgust. What she found was something else entirely. The Alpha King was looking at her, as if she'd done something remarkable. As if she'd answered a question he'd been asking for years. "You didn't know who I was," he said slowly. "When you took me in, when you bandaged my wounds, when you spoke to me about loneliness and dying for something that matters." He tilted his head slightly, studying her. "You treated me exactly as you treated every other wolf who stumbled to your door." Malis swallowed hard. Yes, Your Majesty. I treated you as a wolf in need. Nothing more." "Nothing more," he repeated softly. A strange smile curved his lips, there and gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "Do you know how long it's been since anyone treated me as just a wolf? As something other than a crown to be feared or a prize to be won?" She didn't know how to answer that. Behind her, the other wolves were waking. She heard gasps, felt the ripple of shock as they recognized the crest, the king, the impossible truth of what had happened during the storm. Someone whimpered. Someone dropped to their knees. Soren ignored them all. His attention remained fixed on Mylis. "What is your name?" he asked. "Malis," she whispered. "Just Mylis. I have no pack name anymore." "Malis," he repeated, and the sound of her name in his voice did something strange to her chest. The Omega who sheltered 12 strays through the Veilstorm, who gave away her blankets, her food, her safety, for wolves she'd never met. He paused. "Who sat in the cold so others could be warm." She flushed. "It was nothing. Anyone would have done the same." "No." His voice sharpened. "They wouldn't. I've traveled the width of my kingdom. I've seen packs turn away their own elders. I've watched alphas abandon pregnant females to die in the wilderness. I've met wolves who wouldn't share a crust of bread with a starving child." His eyes burned into hers. "You are not like them. You are something else entirely." Malis's throat tightened. No one had ever looked at her like that. Like she was valuable. Like she was worth something. "Your Majesty," she managed, "I don't understand. Why are you telling me this? Why does it matter what I did?" For a long moment he said nothing. The silence stretched, heavy with something she couldn't identify. Outside, birds were beginning to sing, the world returning to life after the storm's passage. Inside, 12 strays watched with wide eyes as their Alpha King faced a rejected Omega. Then Soren spoke. "My kingdom needs a Luna," he said. "I have searched for 3 years. Every noble daughter, every alpha female, every Omega of good breeding has been presented to me. None of them were right." He took a step closer, and Malis forgot how to breathe. "I came out here looking for something. I didn't know what until I watched you last night." "Your Majesty?" she started. "You will come back to Valdrin with me," Soren continued, as if she hadn't spoken. "You will stand beside me as Luna. You will help me care for my people the way you cared for these wolves. The words didn't make sense. They couldn't make sense. Melis shook her head, backing away until she hit the wall. No, no, that's impossible. I'm a rejected Omega. I'm nothing. I have no bloodline, no status, no power. Your court would never accept me. Your people would never. I don't care what my court accepts, Soren said flatly. I am Alpha King. My word is law. And my word is that you, Melis, will be my Luna. You don't even know me. The words burst out of her, raw and desperate. You spent one night in my cabin. You don't know anything about me, about what I am, about why I was rejected. Something flickered in his eyes. Then tell me. I can't. Why not? Because if you knew the truth, you would kill me yourself. The thought screamed through her mind, but she couldn't say it. Couldn't reveal the secret she'd spent 3 years hiding. The thing that had made her pack cast her out. The thing that would make any wolf in the kingdom put her to death. There are things about me, she whispered, that would change everything. Things that would make you regret this offer. Soren studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached out and took her hand. His grip was warm, steady, certain. I have secrets too, he said quietly. Darkness you cannot imagine, things that would make most wolves flee in terror. His thumb brushed across her knuckles, a touch so gentle it made her ache. We will share our truths in time. For now, all I need to know is this. Will you come with me? Before she could answer, a howl split the morning air. Milas's blood froze. She knew that howl. She would know it anywhere, in her nightmares, in her bones, in the deepest part of her soul, where her trauma lived. Soren's head snapped toward the sound, his body going rigid. Who is that? Melis couldn't answer. Her throat had closed completely, because crashing through the trees, flanked by a dozen armed wolves, was the Alpha who had rejected her 3 years ago. Her former pack had found her. And they hadn't come to talk. The wolves emerged from the tree line like a nightmare-given form. There were 12 of them, armed with blades and bitter hatred, their formation tight and practiced. At their head strode a male whose very presence made Melis's wolf cower and whimper. Brennick, Alpha of the Thornwood pack. The wolf who had rejected her. The wolf who had ordered her cast out to die. He looked exactly as she remembered. Broad-shouldered, iron-haired, with a scar that bisected his left eyebrow and made his permanent scowl even more terrifying. His eyes, cold and colorless as frozen stone, swept across the cabin and landed on her with the force of a physical blow. There she is, Brennick growled. The abomination! Did you think you could hide forever, Melis? Melis couldn't move, couldn't speak. 3 years of running, 3 years of hiding, 3 years of building a fragile peace in this forgotten corner of the world, and it had all been for nothing. They had found her. She was going to die. Stand aside, Brennick commanded his wolves. The creature is mine to kill. He took a step forward, and then Soren moved. One moment he was beside her. The next he stood between Melis and Brennick. His body a wall of muscle and barely contained violence. The air around him changed, thickening with an alpha presence so overwhelming that several of Brennick's wolves stumbled backward. You will not touch her, Soren said quietly. Brennick's eyes narrowed. He studied the stranger blocking his path, taking in the height, the bearing, the dangerous stillness. Then his gaze dropped to the crest on Soren's chest. The color drained from his face. Alpha King, Brennick breathed. He dropped to one knee immediately, his wolves following suit with a clatter of weapons and armor. Forgive me, Your Majesty. I did not know you were here. We meant no disrespect. And yet, you arrived at this cabin with weapons drawn, Soren observed, threatening a wolf under my protection. Under your protection? Brennick's head snapped up, confusion and horror warring on his scarred features. Your Majesty, you don't understand. That female is dangerous. She was cast out from my pack for crimes against nature. She is not worthy of your notice, let alone your protection. I will decide what is worthy of my notice. But Your Majesty? Brennick's voice turned desperate. She's an abomination, a curse upon Wolfkind. If you knew what she truly was— What she truly is, Soren interrupted, his voice dropping to a register that made the air vibrate, is my future Luna. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. Malus stopped breathing. The strays in the cabin gasped. Brennick's wolves exchanged horrified glances, and Brennick himself looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. That's impossible, he sputtered. You cannot mean— The Luna of Valdrin cannot be a rejected Omega, cannot be her. The bloodlines, the protocols, the sacred laws. I am Alpha King. Soren's words fell like hammer blows. My word is sacred law, and I say this woman will be Luna. He paused, letting the weight of his declaration settle over the assembled wolves. Unless you wish to challenge my authority? The question hung in the air, razor sharp. Brennick's jaw worked. His hands clenched at his sides. For one terrible moment, Malus thought he might actually challenge, might reveal everything, might expose her secret right here, in front of the Alpha King and everyone. Then his shoulders slumped. No, Your Majesty, he said hoarsely. I would never challenge you. Good. Soren turned to face Malus, his golden brown eyes softening slightly as they met hers. Gather your things. We leave for Valdrin within the hour. But the strays, Malus heard herself say. They come too. Soren glanced at the wolves still huddled in her cabin, at Corvin and Diel and the pups, and all the others who had nowhere else to go. Every wolf you sheltered through the storm is now under royal protection. They will find homes in my territory, positions suited to their abilities. None of them will wander alone again. Malus's eyes burned. She blinked rapidly, trying to hold back tears that threatened to spill. Why? She whispered. Why would you do this? Soren reached out and touched her face, just a brush of fingertips against her cheek, but it sent electricity crackling through her entire body. Because you showed them mercy when no one else would, he said quietly. Now I show mercy to them, and to you. He turned back to Brennick, and his expression hardened to ice. You will leave now. You will return to your territory and never speak of what you saw here. If I learn that you have spread rumors about the future Luna, if I hear even a whisper of the word abomination from any tongue in any pack— He smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing Malus had ever seen. I will come for you myself. Brennick scrambled to his feet, bowing so low his forehead nearly touched the ground. Yes, Your Majesty. Of course, Your Majesty. We saw nothing. We know nothing. He fled. His wolves fled with him, tripping over each other in their haste to escape the Alpha King's presence. Within moments, they had vanished into the forest, leaving nothing behind but trampled grass and the fading scent of fear. Malus's knees gave out. She would have collapsed if Soren hadn't caught her, his arms wrapping around her waist and pulling her against his chest. He was warm, so warm, and solid in a way that made her feel like maybe, possibly, she wasn't going to shatter into 1,000 pieces. Breathe, he murmured against her hair. You're safe now. I have you. You shouldn't have done that, she gasped. You don't know what I am, what they accused me of. When you find out— When I find out, Soren interrupted gently, I will decide for myself whether it changes anything. Not Brennick, not your former pack. Me. His arms tightened around her. Do you understand? Malus closed her eyes. She didn't understand. None of this made sense. Alpha Kings didn't choose rejected Omegas. They didn't defend strangers. They didn't offer mercy and warmth and safety to wolves who had nothing to give in return. But Soren's arms were around her, and for the first time in 3 years, she felt something she'd forgotten existed: hope. The journey to Valdrin took 4 days. 4 days of traveling through forests and over mountains, of setting up camp each night under star-scattered skies, of watching the Alpha King move among her strays as if they were his own people, rather than the unwanted dregs of wolf society. Melis couldn't make sense of him. On the first night, she watched Soren carry firewood so Corvin wouldn't have to strain his healing leg. On the second, she saw him sit beside the mute girl, Isolde, and simply exist in comfortable silence until she fell asleep. On the third, he helped DL down a steep slope, his hand steady on her elbow, his eyes checking her footing every step of the way. He was nothing like the Alpha King of legend. The stories painted Soren as cold, ruthless, a wolf who had killed his own father to take the throne. They said he never smiled, never showed mercy, never let anyone close enough to know his heart. They said he was more shadow than wolf, more weapon than man. But Melis watched him play with the pups on the fourth morning, letting them climb over his shoulders while their mother laughed for the first time since Melis had met her. She watched him share his own rations with the scarred male, Fenwick, when he thought no one was looking. She watched him check on her every few hours, always with that same unreadable expression, always with questions about her comfort that she didn't know how to answer. "You're staring," Soren said on the final evening of their journey. Melis startled, nearly dropping the water skin she'd been pretending to drink from. They were camped at the edge of a vast valley, and below them, glittering in the twilight, lay the capital city of Valdrin. Towers of white stone, gardens that sprawled like green dreams, a palace that rose from the center like a crown. Tomorrow, she would walk into that palace as the Alpha King's intended Luna. The thought made her want to vomit. "I'm trying to understand you," she admitted quietly. Soren settled beside her on the fallen log she'd claimed. His presence was overwhelming even when he wasn't trying, all that contained power humming just beneath the surface. "What is there to understand?" "Everything." Melis gestured helplessly at the camp behind them, at the strays who had begun to treat Soren with wary adoration. "You're the Alpha King. You could have anyone, any noble daughter, any powerful female, anyone you wanted. Why choose me? Why save the strays? Why?" She trailed off, unable to articulate the 100 questions spinning through her mind. Soren was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different. Lower, rougher. As if the words cost him something. "Do you know why I was out in the storm?" Melis shook her head. "I was running." He smiled bitterly. The Alpha King of Valdrin, running like a coward from his own palace, from the endless parade of females trying to seduce a crown, from advisors who see me as a tool, from a court that watches my every breath, waiting for weakness. He paused. "From memories I cannot escape." "What memories?" Melis asked softly. His jaw tightened. The firelight caught his features, illuminating shadows beneath his eyes that she hadn't noticed before. "My father was not a good man. He taught me that power meant cruelty, that an alpha's strength was measured by how much fear he could inspire." Soren's hands clenched on his knees. "I killed him to stop him from destroying our kingdom. I became Alpha King at 19, covered in my father's blood, surrounded by wolves who either feared me or wanted to use me. And for 10 years, I have been empty." The confession hung in the air between them. Melis didn't know what to say. She wanted to reach out, to touch him, to offer some comfort. But she was still a rejected Omega, still a stranger, still a wolf with secrets that could destroy everything. "Then I saw you," Soren continued quietly, "in that cabin, giving everything you had to wolves who meant nothing to you, sacrificing your warmth so others could be comfortable. I watched you all night, Milas. I watched you check on each wolf, adjust blankets, tend wounds, murmur reassurances to frightened pups. His eyes met hers, burning with an intensity that stole her breath. And I thought, this is what a Luna should be. This is what I've been searching for. Soren, she whispered. It was the first time she'd used his name without his title. You asked why I chose you, he said. That's why. Because in one night, you showed more genuine compassion than I've witnessed in 10 years of ruling. Because you treated a stranger with kindness when you had every reason to be suspicious and cold. He reached out, his fingers brushing against hers on the rough bark of the log. Because when I'm near you, I don't feel empty anymore. Her pulse quickened at his words, at his touch. This couldn't be happening. Alpha Kings didn't bare their souls to rejected Omegas. They didn't confess loneliness and emptiness and a decade of searching. They didn't look at nobodies with eyes full of something that looked terrifyingly like hope. You don't know my secret, she said desperately. When you find out, then tell me. The words came so simply, so directly, that she recoiled. I can't. Why not? Because you'll hate me. Her voice cracked. Because you'll realize Brennick was right. Because you'll wish you'd let him kill me in that clearing. Soren studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, deliberately, he lifted her hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles. The touch sent lightning through her veins. Whatever you're hiding, he murmured against her skin. Whatever crime you think you've committed, I promise you this. I will not hate you. I will not abandon you. And I will never let anyone harm you. He raised his eyes to hers. Do you believe me? Malis wanted to believe him. Gods, she wanted to believe him so badly it hurt, but she'd believed before. She'd trusted before. And it had destroyed her. I want to, she whispered. I want to believe you. Then start there. He released her hand, but the warmth of his touch lingered. Start with wanting. The rest will come in time. Below them, the city of Valdrin sparkled in the gathering darkness. Tomorrow, she would enter that palace. Tomorrow, she would face a court that would despise her, nobles who would question her, females who would want her destroyed. But tonight, she had Soren's promise. Tonight, for the first time in 3 years, she let herself hope. Neither of them noticed the figure watching from the shadows at the edge of camp, a figure with cold eyes and a message already prepared for someone back in Valdrin. The Alpha King had brought home a rejected Omega, and there were wolves who would stop at nothing to destroy her. The palace was a cage made of gold. Malis had been installed in the Luna's quarters, a vast suite of rooms that could have fit her entire cabin 50 times over. Crystal chandeliers scattered rainbow light across marble floors. Silk curtains framed windows that overlooked gardens so beautiful they seemed painted rather than grown. Servants appeared at every turn, bowing, offering food and drink, and assistance with things she didn't know how to name. She hated every moment of it. In the 2 weeks since her arrival, she had been measured for gowns she didn't want, tutored in protocols she couldn't remember, and introduced to nobles whose names blurred together in a sea of false smiles and sharp eyes. The court watched her constantly, whispering behind fans and jeweled fingers. Rejected Omega, they murmured. No bloodline, no breeding. What is the king thinking? Malis heard every word. She pretended not to. The only bright spots were the strays. True to his word, Soren had found positions for all of them. Corvin now served as an advisor to the palace gardeners, his decades of experience finally valued rather than scorned. DL had been placed with the royal midwives, her pregnancy monitored by the finest healers in the kingdom. The pups attended the palace school alongside noble children. Fenwick trained with the guard, his battle scars a badge of honor rather than shame. Even Isolde, the mute girl, had found purpose. She worked in the royal library, organizing scrolls and books with a careful precision that had earned the head librarian's respect. They were thriving. Melis should have been thriving too. But every night, alone in her vast chambers, she lay awake and waited for everything to fall apart. "You're not eating." Melis looked up from her untouched breakfast to find Soren standing in her doorway. He'd taken to visiting her each morning, a habit that made the servants exchange knowing glances and the nobles grind their teeth with jealousy. "I'm not hungry," she said. Soren crossed the room and sat across from her, his amber eyes scanning her face with concern she didn't deserve. "You haven't been hungry for 3 days. You're pale. You're not sleeping." He paused. "What's wrong?" "Everything," she wanted to say. "Everything is wrong." Instead, she forced a smile. "I'm just adjusting. It's a lot to take in." "Melis." His voice was gentle but firm. "Don't lie to me. Not to me." Her smile crumbled. "I don't belong here," she whispered. The words she'd been holding back for 2 weeks came pouring out like water through a broken dam. "Every time I walk through those halls, I can feel them judging me. Every time a noble bows, I can see the contempt in their eyes. I'm a rejected Omega, Soren. I'm nothing. And no matter how many gowns you put me in, no matter how many protocols I learn, that's all I'll ever be to them." Soren reached across the table and took her hands. His grip was warm, steadying. "What they think doesn't matter," he said quietly. "It matters to your kingdom. It matters to your legacy. When you announce me as Luna, they'll riot. They'll say you've gone mad. They'll—" She swallowed hard. "They'll dig into my past. They'll find out why I was rejected. And then everything you've built will come crashing down because of me." "Then let it crash." She stared at him. "What?" Soren's thumb brushed across her knuckles, a touch so tender it made her chest ache. "I have spent 10 years building a kingdom on fear and duty. I have done everything right, made every strategic choice, and sacrificed every personal desire for the good of Valdrin." His jaw tightened. "And I have been miserable, empty, alone." "Soren, you asked me why I chose you," he continued. "I told you it was because of your compassion, your kindness. That was true." His eyes met hers, burning with an intensity that stole her breath. "But there's more. When I'm with you, Melis, I feel something I haven't felt in a decade. I feel alive. I feel like maybe there's more to existence than duty and darkness." Her wolf stirred restlessly inside her, straining toward him with a desperation that frightened her. "I'm going to announce our mating bond at the winter moon ceremony," Soren said. 3 weeks from now, in front of the entire kingdom, I will declare you Luna, and nothing anyone says, nothing anyone does, will change that." He lifted her hands to his lips. "I choose you, Melis, over politics, over legacy, over everything." Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. "You still don't know what I am," she choked out. "You still don't know why they rejected me." "Then tell me." He stood, pulling her gently to her feet, drawing her close until they were only inches apart. "Right now, tell me the worst thing about yourself. Tell me the secret you've been carrying for 3 years." She could feel his heartbeat against her palms, steady and strong. She could feel her own heart shattering with the weight of what she had to say. "I can't shift," she whispered. Soren went still. "What do you mean?" "I mean I can't shift." The words tumbled out, ugly and raw. "My wolf is broken, Soren. Damaged. When I was 16, something happened, something I don't fully understand, and my wolf became locked inside me. I can feel her. I can hear her. But I cannot let her out." Fresh tears streamed down her face. "In the wolf world, that makes me worse than dead. It makes me an abomination. A curse. My pack believed I was possessed by something dark. They said I would corrupt anyone I touched. They rejected me so I wouldn't taint their bloodlines. She paused, swallowing hard before forcing out the rest. For years, they tolerated me as long as I stayed invisible. But when I came of mating age and no male would claim a wolf who couldn't shift, my presence became an embarrassment. Brennick said I was disrupting the pack's breeding lines just by existing, so he cast me out. She waited for it. The horror. The disgust. The moment he realized Brennick had been right all along. Instead, Soren's arms wrapped around her. He pulled her against his chest and held her, just held her, while she sobbed 3 years of shame and fear and loneliness into his shirt. His hand stroked her hair. His lips pressed against her temple. His scent surrounded her, pine and smoke and safety. "You are not an abomination," he murmured fiercely. "You are not cursed. You are not broken." His arms tightened. "You are mine." "How can you say that?" she gasped. "How can you want a Luna who can't even shift? Who can't run with her king? Who can't—" "I want you." He pulled back just enough to cup her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You, Malus. Not your wolf. Not your shift. You." He kissed her forehead, soft and reverent. "We will find answers together. We will discover what happened to you. And if your wolf never runs again, I will still choose you. Every day. For the rest of my life." Malus broke. She surged up and kissed him. The moment their lips met, everything else disappeared. The court, the whispers, the fear, the shame. All of it vanished like mist in sunlight. There was only Soren, only his mouth moving against hers, only his hands pulling her closer, only the electric heat building between them. When they finally parted, both breathless, Soren rested his forehead against hers. 3 weeks, he said hoarsely. 3 weeks until you're officially my Luna. Mila smiled through her tears. 3 weeks. For the first time since arriving at the palace, she believed it might actually happen. She believed she might actually find happiness. She didn't notice the servant watching through the cracked door. She didn't see the servant slip away toward a hidden corridor. And she didn't know that by nightfall, word of her impending coronation as Luna would reach the one person who had spent 22 years ensuring Malus would never rise to power. Her mother. The summons came at midnight. Malus woke to urgent knocking, to servants with pale faces and trembling hands, to whispered words that turned her blood to ice. "The king requests your presence in the throne room. Immediately." She dressed quickly, her fingers fumbling with buttons and laces, her body tight with dread. Something was wrong. She could feel it in the air, in the way the servants avoided her eyes, in the heavy silence that blanketed the palace corridors. When she entered the throne room, she understood why. The vast chamber was filled with wolves, council members in their formal robes, noble families who should have been sleeping in their estates. Guards lining every wall, their hands resting on weapons. And at the center of it all, standing before the raised dais where Soren sat on his throne, was a woman Milas had never expected to see again. Her mother. Vespera stood like a queen herself, draped in black velvet and cold authority. Her hair, once the same deep auburn as Milas's, had gone silver at the temples. Her face, still beautiful despite the years, was carved into an expression of absolute contempt. Their eyes met across the crowded room. Milas stopped breathing. "Ah," Vespera said, her voice carrying with practiced clarity. "There she is, the abomination who has bewitched our beloved Alpha King." Whispers erupted through the crowd. Malus felt them like physical blows, each word a knife sliding between her ribs. She forced her legs to move, forced herself to walk toward the throne where Soren sat rigid and silent. "Mother," she managed, "what are you doing here?" What any devoted mother would do. Vespera's smile was poison wrapped in silk. protecting the kingdom from a threat it doesn't understand. She turned to address the assembled wolves, her voice rising with theatrical grief. My lords and ladies, I come before you with a heavy heart. For years I have carried a secret shame, a burden that has haunted my every waking moment. Enough. Soren's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. He rose from his throne, his presence filling the room with suffocating authority. I did not summon this assembly. I did not invite you here, Lady Vespera. You have 3 seconds to explain yourself before I have you removed. Vespera didn't flinch. If anything, her smile widened. I am here, Your Majesty, because you deserve to know the truth about the creature you intend to make Luna. She gestured dramatically toward Melis. My daughter is not merely a wolf who cannot shift. She is something far worse. Something I have spent 16 years trying to contain. The whispers grew louder. Melis felt the room spinning around her. When Melis was born, Vespera continued, she was different. Wrong. Her wolf manifested too early, too powerfully. By the time she was 3, she could shift at will. By 6, she was stronger than wolves, twice her age. By 10, Vespera paused for effect. By 10, she had killed. That's a lie, Melis gasped. Is it? Vespera's cold eyes fixed on her. Tell them about the boy, Melis. Tell them about little Aldrich, your childhood playmate. Tell them how he died. The name hit Melis like a physical blow. Aldrich. She hadn't thought about Aldrich in years, hadn't let herself remember. I didn't kill him, she whispered. But her voice was weak, uncertain, because the truth was, she didn't remember. There were gaps in her memory from that time, blank spaces that had always terrified her. You didn't kill him, Vespera agreed, surprising her. Your wolf did. Your uncontrollable, savage, monstrous wolf. It took over your body without your consent and tore that boy apart. She turned back to the crowd. I was there. I saw it happen. And I knew that if I didn't do something, my daughter would become the greatest threat this kingdom had ever faced. Soren stepped forward, positioning himself between Melis and her mother. What did you do? I saved her. Vespera's voice rang with righteous conviction. I found a witch powerful enough to bind her wolf, to lock it away where it could never hurt anyone again. I sacrificed everything, my reputation, my position in our pack, my own daughter's love, to protect the world from what she truly is. The throne room erupted in chaos. Nobles shouted questions and accusations. Council members demanded answers. Guards shifted uneasily, their hands tightening on their weapons. And through it all, Melis stood frozen, her mind reeling with impossible revelations. Her mother had done this to her. Her own mother had locked her wolf away. Not to punish her, not out of cruelty, but because she believed Melis was a monster. Is this true? Soren's voice was quiet, but it silenced the room instantly. He turned to face Melis, his wolf-gold eyes searching her face. Do you remember any of this? Melis shook her head helplessly. I can't. There are gaps. Things I don't remember from when I was young. But I never... She pressed her hands to her temples, trying to force the memories to surface. I don't remember killing anyone. I would never... The witch's binding didn't just lock away her wolf, Vespera interrupted. It locked away the memories, too. The trauma. The evidence of what she'd done. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to something almost gentle. I did it to protect you, Melis. To give you a chance at a normal life. But you couldn't leave well enough alone, could you? You had to attract the attention of the Alpha King himself. Enough. Soren's command cracked through the air like thunder. I have heard enough accusations without proof. Lady Vespera, you claim my intended killed a child. You claim she is a danger to the kingdom. Where is your evidence? The witch who performed the binding still lives, Vespera said calmly. She can confirm everything I've said. She can show you the memories she extracted, the truth of what my daughter truly is. Soren's jaw tightened. Then summon her. We will hear testimony properly, in a formal trial, not this theatrical ambush. He turned to his guards. Escort Lady Vespera to guest chambers. She is not to leave the palace until this matter is resolved. His eyes swept the assembled nobles. This assembly is dismissed. Anyone who spreads rumors about the future Luna before the trial will answer to me personally. The crowd dispersed reluctantly, casting glances at Melis that ranged from curious to terrified. When the throne room was finally empty except for her and Soren, the silence felt deafening. I didn't know, Melis said brokenly. Soren, I swear to you, I didn't know any of this. I don't remember killing anyone. I don't remember. I believe you. He crossed to her and gathered her in his arms, holding her against his chest. Whatever happened when you were a child, whatever your mother did or claims you did, it doesn't change anything. How can you say that? She pulled back to look at him, tears streaming down her face. If she's telling the truth, if I really am some kind of monster, then we will face it together. His hands cupped her face, thumbs brushing away her tears. I told you once that I have darkness of my own, that I killed my own father. Did you think that was simple? Clean? His voice roughened. I didn't just kill him, Melis. I destroyed him. I let 10 years of rage and hatred consume me, and when it was over, I barely recognized myself. She stared at him, seeing something in his eyes she hadn't noticed before. Pain. Deep, old pain that had never fully healed. We are both wolves with shadows in our past, Soren continued quietly. But shadows don't define us. What we choose now, who we choose to become, and that's what matters. He pressed his forehead to hers. I choose you. Darkness and all. Melis closed her eyes, letting his words wash over her. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that whatever truth emerged from this trial, they would survive it together. But deep in the locked cage inside her chest, her wolf was stirring. And for the first time in 16 years, it felt like something was trying to break free. The trial began 3 days later. The Great Hall had been transformed into a court of judgment, with the Alpha King presiding from his throne and the noble families arranged in tiered seating like spectators at a blood sport. At the center of the floor, 2 chairs faced each other, one for the accused, one for the accuser. Melis sat in the first chair, her hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. She had barely slept since her mother's arrival. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw fragments of memories that might have been real or might have been nightmares. A boy's face, screaming, blood on her hands. Had she really killed Aldrich? Had her wolf really been so uncontrollable that her own mother had chosen to lock it away forever? Bring in the witch, Soren commanded. The doors opened and a woman entered. She was ancient, older than anyone Melis had ever seen, with skin like crumpled parchment and eyes that gleamed with unnatural light. She walked with a gnarled staff, each step slow and deliberate, and when she finally settled into a chair placed between the accused and the accuser, the air in the hall seemed to thicken. I am Thessaly, the witch said, her voice surprisingly strong for her aged body. I was summoned to the Thornwood Pack 22 years ago to deal with a problem child. A wolf whose abilities were too strong, too wild, too dangerous to be allowed to roam free. Tell them what you did, Vespera demanded from the crowd. Tell them how you saved us all. Thessaly's glowing eyes moved to Melis. Something flickered in their depths. Something that looked almost like sorrow. I bound the child's wolf, Thessaly said slowly. I locked it away behind walls of magic so thick that nothing could break through. I took her memories of the incident that had prompted the binding, and I left her as a shell of what she had been. She paused. I was told I was doing a mercy. that the child was a danger to herself and others, that without the binding, she would grow into a monster. And was she? Soren leaned forward on his throne. Was the child a danger? Thessaly was silent for a long moment. I don't know, she finally admitted. I was shown evidence. I was told stories. But the child herself? Her eyes found Malus again. The child I met was terrified, confused. She didn't understand what was happening or why her mother wanted to take her wolf away. She begged me not to do it. She promised she would be good, that she would never hurt anyone again. Malus's breath caught. A memory stirred, faint and fragmented. Small hands reaching out. A woman's face looming over her. Please don't. Please. I'll be good. I promise I'll be good. But you did it anyway, Soren said quietly. I was paid handsomely. Thessaly's voice held no shame. And Lady Vespera was very persuasive. She showed me the boy's body. She showed me the wounds. She told me her daughter had done it in a rage, that the child's wolf was corrupted beyond salvation. The witch paused. But? Soren pressed. Thessaly's eyes narrowed. But I have lived many centuries, Alpha King. I have seen countless wolves, countless bindings, and countless acts of violence. And something about that night has always troubled me. Vespera surged to her feet. This is ridiculous. The witch confirmed the binding. She confirmed the danger. What more do you need? I need the truth. Soren's voice was ice. And I'm beginning to suspect we haven't heard it yet. He turned to Thessaly. You said you took the child's memories. Do you still have them? The witch nodded slowly. Memory magic doesn't destroy. It merely relocates. The memories I extracted from the girl have been preserved in a crystal for over 2 decades. She reached into her robes and withdrew a small vial that glowed with pale light. I brought it with me, as requested. The hall erupted in murmurs. Malus stared at the vial, her chest tight with anticipation. Her memories, the truth of what had happened that night. It was right there, glowing in an old witch's wrinkled hand. Show us, Soren commanded. Thessaly rose and moved to the center of the hall. She unstoppered the vial and poured its contents onto the floor, where the light pooled and spread, rising into the air like mist. And then Malus saw. She saw herself as a child, small and auburn-haired, playing in a forest clearing with a dark-haired boy. Aldrich. They were laughing, chasing each other through the trees. The memory was warm, golden, innocent. Then the scene shifted. Night. The same forest. Malus was crouched behind a bush, watching something. Her small face was pale with terror. And in the clearing, Aldrich lay bleeding on the ground. But standing over him wasn't a child. It was a woman. Vespera. The memory showed everything. Vespera's hands stained with blood. Her cold expression as she looked down at the dying boy. And her voice, clear and terrible, speaking to someone out of frame. This is perfect. Now everyone will believe the creature is dangerous. Now they'll let me bind her wolf before she becomes too powerful to control. The memory dissolved. Silence crashed over the hall like a wave. Malus couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Her mother had killed Aldrich. Her mother had framed her. Her mother had locked away her wolf not to protect anyone, but to control her. No, Vespera hissed. No, that's a fabrication. The witch tampered with the memories. She's lying. She's... Silence. Soren rose from his throne, and his presence filled the hall with crushing authority. His eyes blazed with barely contained fury. You murdered a child. You tortured your own daughter. You stole her wolf, her memories, and her entire life. He descended the steps, each footfall echoing like a death knell. Why? Vespera's composure cracked, her face twisted with something ugly, something desperate. Because she was going to be more powerful than me. she spat. My daughter, the prophesied Omega who would birth the strongest alpha line in history. Do you think I would let that happen? Do you think I would stand aside while my own child surpassed everything I had worked for? The admission hung in the air, damning and absolute. You did this out of jealousy, Malus whispered. You destroyed my life because you were jealous of a child. Vespera laughed, high and brittle. I did what was necessary, and I would do it again. Her eyes glittered with malice. Besides, it's too late. The binding can't be broken. Your wolf is locked away forever. You'll never be a true Luna. You'll never be anything but a broken, worthless... Guards. Soren's voice cut through her tirade. Take her to the dungeons. She will face execution at dawn. Vespera screamed as the guards seized her, screamed accusations and curses and threats. But Malus barely heard her. She was staring at her own hands, seeing them clearly for the first time in her life. Clean hands. Innocent hands. She hadn't killed anyone. She had never been a monster. But the relief lasted only a moment before a new terror gripped her. If the binding couldn't be broken, if her wolf was truly locked away forever, then her mother had won. Even from the dungeons, even facing death. Vespera had succeeded in destroying her daughter completely. And as that realization crashed over her, Malus felt something inside her shatter. The dungeon was cold. Malus stood outside her mother's cell, wrapped in a cloak that did nothing to stop the chill seeping into her bones. She didn't know why she'd come here, what answers she expected to find, what closure could possibly exist between a daughter and the mother who had systematically destroyed her life. Vespera sat on the stone bench inside the cell, her fine clothes now rumpled and stained. But her eyes, when they found Malus through the bars, still held that cold, calculating gleam. Come to gloat? Vespera asked. Come to understand. Malus stepped closer to the bars. The prophecy you mentioned, the one about an Omega birthing the strongest alpha line. What was it? Vespera laughed bitterly. Does it matter now? It matters to me. For a long moment, her mother said nothing. Then, slowly, she began to speak. When you were born, a seer came to our pack. She took one look at you and started screaming. Said she'd never seen a wolf soul so powerful. Said you would grow to be the most formidable Omega in 1,000 years. Said your children would reshape the world. Vespera's voice dripped with old resentment. Everyone celebrated. The miracle child. The blessed Omega. And I was suddenly nothing. Just the vessel that had carried greatness. So you decided to destroy me instead. I decided to control you. Vespera's eyes hardened. To bind your wolf before you could realize your potential. To keep you small and manageable and dependent on me. But you wouldn't cooperate. You kept growing stronger. Kept showing signs of the power the seer had predicted. I had to take drastic action. Killing an innocent child was drastic action? Vespera shrugged. Aldrich was a means to an end. His death gave me the excuse I needed. The evidence I needed. And for 22 years, it worked. A cruel smile curved her lips. Your wolf is still bound, Malus. Even with the truth exposed, even with me in chains, I've still won. You'll never be a proper Luna. You'll never fulfill the prophecy. You'll spend your entire life knowing what you could have been, what I stole from you. Malus felt the words hit their mark, felt them burrow into her chest like thorns. But before she could respond, a voice spoke from the shadows. The binding can be broken. Both women turned. Thessaly emerged from the darkness, her glowing eyes fixed on Malus with an intensity that made her skin prickle. What? Malus breathed. I lied. The witch moved closer, her staff clicking against the stone floor. When I told the court the binding couldn't be broken, I lied. I wanted to see what Lady Vespera would do, how she would react. Her lips curved into a thin smile. She confirmed everything I suspected. her cruelty, her jealousy, her complete lack of remorse. Vespera surged against the bars. "You treacherous hag!" Thessaly ignored her. "The binding I placed on you as a child was powerful, but not permanent. It was designed to weaken over time, to eventually dissolve on its own when you were old enough to control your wolf naturally." Her expression darkened. But Lady Vespera discovered this. She came to me 5 years after the original binding and paid me to make it permanent. Paid me handsomely to ensure her daughter would never access her wolf again. "Can you undo it?" Milas asked desperately. "I can," Thessaly said slowly. "But the process is dangerous. Your wolf has been caged for over 2 decades. She is wild with fury, desperate for freedom. When I release her, she may consume you entirely. You may lose yourself to her rage. Or, or you may find a way to merge with her, to become whole for the first time in your life." Thessaly's glowing eyes bore into hers. "It depends on you, on your strength, on your will to survive." Melis thought of everything she had endured: the rejection, the exile, the years of loneliness and shame, the discovery that her own mother had orchestrated her suffering from the very beginning. If she was going to face her wolf, face the fury and pain that had been locked away for 22 years, she needed to be strong. She needed to be more than she had ever been. "Do it," she said. "Melis, wait." Soren's voice came from the dungeon entrance. He strode toward her, his face tight with concern. "You can't make this decision alone. The risk is mine to take." She turned to face him, reaching up to cup his face in her hands. "My whole life, I've been controlled by others. By my mother. By my former pack. By fear of what I might be. I'm done letting other people decide my fate. If you lose yourself, then you'll bring me back." She smiled through her tears. "You promised me once that you'd never abandon me, that we'd face our darkness together. This is me asking you to keep that promise." Soren stared at her for a long moment. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her, deep and fierce and desperate. "Together," he murmured against her lips, "always together." They moved to the courtyard as dawn approached. The strays were there, all 12 of them, forming a circle around the space where Melis would face her wolf. Corvin's eyes shone with pride. Diel clutched her newborn daughter, born just days ago. The pups sat with their mother, watching with wide, solemn eyes. Fenwick stood at attention like a soldier guarding his queen, and Isolde, silent as always, held a single white flower in her hands. They had come to support her, to witness her transformation, to catch her if she fell. Thessaly began the ritual. Ancient words filled the air, power crackling like lightning. Melis felt the magic surround her, felt it seeping into her bones, reaching for the cage deep inside her chest where her wolf had been trapped for 22 years. The first crack was agony. She screamed as the binding began to shatter, as walls that had stood for decades crumbled like ancient ruins. Pain ripped through her body, through her soul, through every part of her being. And then her wolf rushed forward. She was rage, she was fury, she was 22 years of imprisonment condensed into a single devastating moment of release. She wanted to destroy, to tear, to make everyone who had ever hurt her pay. Melis felt herself being swept away, but then she heard them. "You can do this, child." Corvin's voice, steady and sure. "We believe in you." Diel's voice, soft with maternal love. "You're not alone." The pups, chanting together in their small voices. "Fight." Fenwick, fierce and unwavering, and Soren, his voice cutting through the chaos like a beacon. "Come back to me, Melis. Come back to me." She reached for that voice, reached for the love behind it, reached for everything good and true and real that she had found since that night in the storm. And slowly, impossibly, She began to merge with her wolf. Not fighting, not conquering, accepting. She accepted the rage because it was justified. She accepted the pain because it had made her strong. She accepted every dark, wild, terrifying part of herself because it was hers. It had always been hers. When she opened her eyes, the world looked different, sharper, clearer, more alive than it had ever been. And when she looked down at her hands, they were covered in silver fur. She had shifted. For the first time in 22 years, Melis stood in her wolf form, whole and complete, and finally free. The winter moon ceremony was the most important event in the Valdran calendar. For 300 years, Alpha Kings had used this night to cement their power, to forge alliances, to announce bonds that would shape the kingdom's future. Every noble family attended. Every pack sent representatives. The great hall blazed with candlelight and expectation. But this year was different. This year the hall held not just nobles, but strays. Not just the powerful, but the forgotten. In the front row, Corvin sat beside Diel and her infant daughter. Fenwick stood guard at the door, his scarred face proud and watchful. The pups fidgeted in their seats while their mother shushed them with fond exasperation, and Isolde, still quiet as always, but with eyes that now held peace instead of terror, watched the proceedings thoughtfully. They were all dressed in fine clothes, gifts from the Alpha King. But more than that, they wore expressions of belonging, of home. Melis stood behind the great doors, waiting for her cue. She barely recognized herself. The gown she wore was silver, the color of moonlight, flowing around her like liquid starlight. Her auburn hair was piled high on her head, threaded with crystals that caught the light. But the real transformation wasn't external. It was the wolf that moved beneath her skin, at peace for the first time in her life. In the 2 weeks since her transformation, she had learned to shift at will, to run through the forests with Soren at her side, 2 wolves racing beneath the stars, to feel the wind in her fur and the earth beneath her paws, and the wild joy of a soul finally made whole. She had also learned the full extent of her power. The seer's prophecy hadn't been exaggeration. Melis's wolf was extraordinary, stronger and faster than any Omega had a right to be. Her senses were sharper, her endurance was greater. And there was something else, something that had emerged during her first shift and grown stronger every day since. She could feel the bonds between wolves, every connection, every loyalty, every thread of love or hatred that linked one soul to another. She could sense them all. She could strengthen them, nurture them, help broken bonds heal. It was, Thessaly had told her, the rarest gift an Omega could possess, the gift of a true Luna. The doors swung open. Melis walked into the great hall, and every eye turned to watch her approach the throne. Soren stood waiting, dressed in black and silver, his amber eyes blazing with something that stole her breath. Behind him, the council members who had once whispered against her now sat in respectful silence. The nobles who had mocked her now bowed their heads. She had won them over not through politics or power, but through action. In the 2 weeks since her transformation, she had worked tirelessly to prove herself worthy of the Luna title. She had helped resolve disputes between packs. She had visited the poorest villages in the kingdom and listened to their concerns. She had established the first official sanctuary for strays, a place where rejected wolves could find safety and support. She had shown them what a Luna could be when she led with compassion instead of cruelty. When she reached the throne, Soren descended to meet her. "My people," he announced, his voice carrying through the hall. "Tonight, I present to you the wolf who will stand beside me as Luna of Valdran. She came to me as a stranger in a storm, a rejected Omega who sheltered 12 strays when she had nothing to give but her own warmth." His eyes met hers, soft with love. She taught me what true strength looks like. Not dominance, not fear, but the courage to be kind in a world that rewards cruelty. Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. Soren took her hand. Do you, Malus of No Pack, accept the title of Luna? Do you pledge to protect this kingdom, to nurture its people, to stand beside me through darkness and light? Malus's heart was full to bursting. I do, she said clearly. I pledge my life, my strength, and my heart to Valdrin and its king. Soren smiled, that rare, beautiful smile that she had learned to cherish above all treasures. Then before these witnesses, I claim you as my Luna, my partner, my mate. He leaned in and kissed her. The hall erupted in cheers, but Malus barely heard them. She was lost in the feeling of Soren's lips on hers, in the warmth of his arms around her, in the joy of finally belonging somewhere. To someone. When they parted, Soren produced a small box from his pocket. One more thing, he murmured, opening it to reveal a ring. Not silver or gold, but carved from pure moonstone, glowing with inner light. A symbol of our bond. A reminder that even in darkness, we found each other. Milus's eyes blurred with tears as he slipped it onto her finger. Later, after the ceremony had ended and the guests had departed, she stood with Soren on the balcony overlooking the city. Dawn was breaking over Valdren, painting the towers and gardens in shades of rose and gold. My mother's execution happened this morning, she said quietly. It wasn't a question. She had felt the thread of Vespera's life snap, felt the bond between mother and daughter dissolve into nothing. Yes, Soren confirmed. Are you all right? Milas considered the question carefully. I thought I would feel something, she admitted. Grief, maybe, or satisfaction, but mostly I just feel free. She turned to look at him. She spent 22 years trying to destroy me, but in the end, everything she did led me here. To you, to a family of strays who love me, to a kingdom that needs me. She smiled softly. Her cruelty became the foundation of my joy. Soren pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. The strays are asking about you, he said. Corvin wants to know if you'll visit the gardens today. Diel's daughter needs a name, and she wants your blessing. The pups are demanding another story. He chuckled. You've become their whole world, you know. Milas's heart swelled with love. They were the first ones to see me, she said. Not the rejected Omega, not the broken wolf. Just me. I'll never forget that. Below them, the city was waking. Wolves moved through the streets, going about their daily lives. But among them, scattered like seeds of change, were the strays she had sheltered. Wolves who had been rejected, abandoned, forgotten, now woven into the fabric of the kingdom. I have a proposal, Malus said suddenly. Oh? The sanctuary for strays. I want to expand it. Not just a place for rejected wolves to hide, but a network across the entire kingdom. Safe havens where any wolf in need can find shelter and support. She turned to face him, her eyes bright with determination. No more mating auctions, no more casting out the unwanted. We changed the system entirely. Soren studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled, that rare, beautiful smile that she loved more than anything in the world. You see? He said softly. This is why you're Luna. Not because of prophecy or power, because you look at the broken things and see how to make them whole. He kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her lips. Whatever you want to build, he murmured against her mouth. I will help you build it. Every sanctuary, every safe haven, every new beginning. His arms tightened around her. I love you, Malus. I love you too, she whispered back. Dawnlight spilled across the balcony, warming their faces. Somewhere in the palace, she could hear the pups laughing, could hear Corvin's gravelly voice telling them to settle down, and could hear the sounds of a family that had been built not from blood, but from choice. She had come to this kingdom as a rejected Omega with nothing. Now she was Luna, mate, mother to all the lost wolves who needed her. And as she stood in Soren's arms watching the sun rise over the kingdom that was now her home, Malus finally understood what the old seer had truly prophesied. Not power, not dominance, but the strength to love so fiercely, so completely, that even the most broken wolves could find their way home. The storm had brought her strays, and by dawn, the Alpha King had claimed her Luna. But in the end, it was Malus who had claimed something far more precious: a family, a purpose, a life beyond anything she had ever dared to dream. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, please let me know in the comments what you thought. I read every single one, and your support means more than you know.